I want you guys to imagine that the water in a water bottle represents knowledge, all right? And the water bottle itself, let's say it represents a topic. So the water in the water bottle represents a knowledge that someone has over a certain topic. Now, some may know more about different topics, so they'd have several different water bottles. Some may have more knowledge about a certain topic, so they may have more water in their water bottles. Now, a good teacher, when they're trying to share the knowledge, share the water that they have, they'll start at the very top, they'll poke a hole in the bottom, let a little water come out, all right? Moderation. So that'll water the seeds and allow them to grow. Now, of course, if you don't share enough water, then the lesson's very dry and the seeds just don't grow. If you share too much water, you risk drowning the seeds. They can only handle so much knowledge. So they'll start at the top, and then for the next lesson, they'll go a little lower, and a little more water comes out. And a little lower, and a little lower, and eventually, all the water will come out, and they've shared all the knowledge that they have over that specific, my throat's kind of sore, specific topic. My problem is I ain't got time for that, so we're just going to jab it in the bottom and hope for the best. So, if you guys feel like you're overwhelmed, now I'm not super knowledgeable, so you'll probably get a few drips today anyway. It's not as though I don't know a better way to do it, it's just I don't have time to do it. So we're just going to kind of go over everything. Today's topic is over worship, specifically worship of God. The title is Shachah Elohim, I believe. My pronunciation is probably bad. When Microsoft PowerPoint, it has a translator, so if you highlight it, sometimes it'll translate it for you and back into English, which is super awesome because I don't know how to speak Hebrew very well. So in this case, if you put two words together, sometimes it'll change it up, but this time it changed Shachah, which is worship, and Elohim, which is God, to Jesus Grease, so I don't know how that happened. However, I am impressed with Microsoft, the fact that because the name Jesus, which in Hebrew would be Yeshua, isn't found in here, but Microsoft knew enough to know that Jesus is God, so they interpreted it as such. So this is not an advertisement, but still. Oh, I probably have to turn this on. That's probably, there we go. All right, a lot of us, or many people have a misunderstanding, a misconception of what worship is. Now, my brother Samuel, when I was preparing this lesson, we were sitting down together, and he saw this specific slide, and he said, "What do you mean we have a misunderstanding of worship?" Well, I said, some people don't know who we're supposed to be worshiping, like even just Christians don't know who we're supposed to be worshiping. And he said, "Daniel, you're an idiot," which is probably true. He's like, everyone knows who we're supposed to be worshiping. Every Christian knows we are supposed to be worshiping God. And the truth is, if I ask just about anyone in here, who are we supposed to be worshiping, most of you guys, I hope everyone would say, it's God. But unfortunately, what we say and what we actually do are two different things. Many of you may not know this, but a lot of people, they will actually leave a church because they don't like the worship service. They might not think that they might want modern music, or they might want hymns, or they might, whatever it is, they might not like the worship service. But that's the funny thing. Who is the worship service for? It's not for us, it's for God. So it's crazy to me to think that people are willing to leave a church because they didn't like something that wasn't even for them. The worship service is for God. And until we get rid of this misconception, we will never truly worship God in the way that He deserves. And truth is, if we didn't enjoy the worship service, then I'll bet God didn't enjoy the worship service. Not because He's upset that we were upset from it, but He's probably upset that we thought it was for us. The worship service is for God. Fortunately, anyone can learn how to worship properly. How? By understanding the answers to these three questions. Who is to be worshipped? We already said it was God, but we'll go into more detail. Why is He to be worshipped? I did wake up with a sore throat, so if I take a drink of water, it's not because I forgot what I was saying. Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, that's my excuse this week. All right, why is He to be worshipped, and how He is to be worshipped? All right, I had this buddy of mine. It's obvious that man is not to be worshipped, but I had this buddy. He's a lot better now, but he was super conceited, okay? This specific guy was like, he could do no wrong. If you disagreed with him, you were wrong. And if he ever did anything wrong, it must not be wrong because he done did it and he could do no wrong. So one day I come to this guy and I say, bro, you are the most conceited person I have ever met. And he goes, that's because I have the most reason to be. I'm thinking, now, I do not win many arguments, okay? Some people run, some people fight, I play dead. I'm just not a confrontational person, so I don't generally win arguments. But I'm pretty sure I won that argument. Now, I can't take all the credit. He did most of the heavy lifting for me. But Nebuchadnezzar was a lot like that. He was the dude who thought if there's anyone who deserved to be conceited, he thought it was him. No one had ever had an empire like his before him. So one day he steps out and looks at his vast empire and says, wow, look at what I have done. I'm a big deal. Not to be confused with me, who's only kind of a big deal, my humble self. But he starts praising and worshiping himself, and God realizes this and says, God takes his kingdom away, and God takes his sanity away, all because instead of worshiping God, he worshipped himself. Man is not to be worshipped. This can also be seen in the story of Cornelius. Cornelius was a man who loved God. He worshiped God. He was a man who was very generous and very loving towards others. But there was a problem. Cornelius was going to hell. Now, you might think, I thought you said he loved God and worshiped him. He did, but there's a problem. He didn't know who Jesus was. God knew that he didn't know who Jesus was, but he knew that he was ready to accept him. So he calls Cornelius up in a dream and says, hey, go find my buddy Peter. He'll tell you what to do. So Cornelius, he goes finds Peter. As soon as Peter comes to his house, Cornelius bows down and starts worshiping him. And Peter says to not do this in Acts 10, verse 26. But Peter took him up, saying, stand up. I myself also am a man. So it's clear from Scripture that mankind is not to be worshipped. What about angels? Angels are celestial beings. They're pretty cool, certainly much cooler than I am. Are angels allowed to be worshipped? Well, according to the book of Revelation, when John was actually receiving the revelation, he saw an angel and he bowed down and started worshiping him. And the angel said to him, don't do this thing. I'm just like you. I'm just another servant of God. And he says to worship God. So who's supposed to be worshipped? God. Not angels, not man, God. Now what about nature? Nature's not man, nor is it angels. Isaiah 2:8, I believe, yeah. Isaiah 2:8 kind of talks about idolatry, idol worship. Idols are things that are man-made, things that were worshipped by man. And Isaiah is trying to get around the fact, why are people so stupid that they're worshiping things that they made with their own hands? That's like saying someone telling me, this water bottle made the entire world. And I look at the bottom, I'm like, made in China. Probably not. They were worshiping things that they had made. Is the creation greater than the creator? And then in Romans 1, verse 25, Paul actually addresses the idea that people were worshiping nature. They were worshiping creation rather than the creator. So it's obvious from these verses that God doesn't want nature to be worshipped. Who is to be worshipped? God alone. You guys know the story of Jesus when he was in the desert. He fasted for 40 days. He didn't eat anything. And Satan came and tempted him, telling him he could make a rock into bread. And Jesus, he resisted his temptation. So Satan brings him to a place where he shows him all the kingdoms of the world. And he says, if you will bow down to me and worship, I will give you all these kingdoms. Now Jesus would obviously eventually get all these kingdoms later, but Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with the right now. And oftentimes we are tempted with the right now, the temporary things of right now. But Jesus says in Luke 4, verse 8, and Jesus answered and said unto him, get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him shalt thou serve, and him only shalt thou serve. So who is to be worshipped? God alone. All right, we already discussed who is to be worshipped. Now why is to be worshipped? All right, first off, he's the creator of everything. I don't know who else should be worshipped if not the creator of everything. No, I was having an argument with a buddy of mine. He was an atheist, and not all atheists are bad, of course. But this particular atheist really hates God, which I find difficult because he doesn't believe in God, but he hates him. He thinks that's a way, but either way. And he was telling me, he's like, we got into the discussion of God being omnipotent. And he said, prove that God's omnipotent using the Bible. I said, okay. So I came to the very first verse. In Hebrew, it's Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim vet haaretz. I don't know how to say Hebrew in not a monotone voice. Like, I can't get into it. Which is, in beginning created God the heavens and the earth, which is close to that's a very direct translation. But the very beginning describes to us that Jesus and God, they created everything, because Jesus is God. So I told him, if God created everything, then everything that has power was created by God. So God has the power to create all power. Therefore, he has all power. And he's like, well, that doesn't make sense. I can make a robot that's stronger than me. I can make binoculars that can see farther than me. I can make a nuclear, or he can't make a nuclear bomb, but he said mankind can make a nuclear bomb which is more powerful than we are. So he said the creation is not necessarily less powerful than the creator. And that seems like a super logical thing until you start using your head. So here's why. There's a difference between man creating something and God creating something. And here's the difference. Man can't actually create anything. Yeah. So you might be thinking, why can't we create anything? Someone created this water bottle, and it's a very nice water bottle. But the truth is, we actually have a law against creating things. Not like if you create something, you're going to prison, but it's a natural law. Nothing can be created or destroyed. It can only be, does anyone know the answer? Changed in form. So all we have the power to do is transform something that's already been created by God. So all we have the power to do is manipulate God's creation. We don't actually have the power to create anything ourselves. So it makes sense that we could manipulate things that are more powerful than us into things that are even more powerful than us. But God didn't manipulate creation. He created everything. He didn't manipulate things that were pre-created, things that someone else created before him, because no one was before him. He caused everything. So there's a huge difference between God creating something and us creating something, because we can't actually create anything. So God created everything. He created all power, therefore he has all power. Everything that's possible, God created. So God is the creator of everything. Nebuchadnezzar, we already talked a little bit about him. He was the egotistical king. Once God took away his sanity and he went crazy, he even started crawling around like an animal and started eating grass like an animal, God gave him back his sanity for a moment. And in that moment of sanity, Nebuchadnezzar looked up to heaven and gave God the glory. And he realized something. He realized that God is in control of both heaven and in both earth. So he's in control of everything. And he says he's always been. So God has always been and will always be in control. So here we see God as the creator of everything. And Nebuchadnezzar even, who is a pagan, by the way. This is, as far as I know, the only chapter in the Bible, or at least one of them, that was written from a pagan's perspective. Even a pagan realized that God was the one in control. So God is the creator of everything, and he is the sustainer of everything. And if that's not enough for us to worship God, he is the redeemer of everything. If it's not enough that he created you, if it's not enough that he sustains you, then it should be enough that he's redeemed you. These are the reasons why God should be worshipped. All right, how is he to be worshipped? Oh boy, I'm about to blow the men's minds in here because I don't know the answer to this either. Love and worship are very similar. So I'm driving to Hutch, right? I'm about to go to my track meet. It was a multi-meet. And I'm listening to a Christian radio, and on this radio, I don't know who was speaking, but he was talking about love. Such a nice topic. And during this topic, he says, men and women are different when it comes to love, because men don't know how to really show love, or they don't know what love looks like. I'm thinking, what's he talking about? So then he goes, men have the misconception that love is shown through actions. And I'm just like, is it not? Yeah. So I'm listening to this guy very intently because I'm thinking I'm stupid by this point, and he proves it is true. So I'm listening to this guy, and he's like, men think it's all about actions. You do this for your wife or your loved one. You do this and this and this. But the truth is, actions can be manipulated. Words can be told as lies. You might have ulterior motives, so actions can be deceived. And I'm trying to think in my little pea brain how love is shown. So I'm thinking, it can't be an action according to this guy. What if you just tell them that you love them? I'm like, oh, that's an action. Dang it. And then, of course, you can be lying. And I said, what if you do nice things for them? Well, again, that's an action. You can do nice things for people you don't love. I said, selflessness. You have to be selfless. What if you do a selfless thing? Well, again, things that may appear to be selfless, the person could be actually doing it for self-praise. So I was so confused how women can tell what love is. So I get in the van because I was about to go. I got to Hutch. I was getting in the van so I could go to my track meet. And there were two girls in front of me. One of them happened to be Holly Miles, Mark and Susan Miles' daughter-in-law. And then there were two girls in front of them, and then two guys. I wasn't going to ask the guys. They're just as dumb as I am. So I asked Holly, and the other girl's name was Kaylee. I said, how do you know if someone loves you? Because I can't figure it out. And I'll bet they had a beautiful answer. I'll bet it was the most intelligent answer I've ever heard. But I'm a man, and I wasn't paying attention. So I don't know what they said. But I have realized that love is more than just actions. Because again, actions can be manipulated. Love requires a sincere heart, and so does worship. Now, all of us know, or at least you've heard of, a nagging mother. I'm not talking about a mother who nags her kids or nags her husband. I'm talking about one of those mothers who nags other mothers, all right? Like, oh my goodness, why don't your kids wash their hands? That's gross. The Pharisees were a lot like that in that they used that same argument with Jesus. They came to Jesus, I kid you not, and asked him, why don't your disciples wash their hands? Like, is that all they had against Jesus? Is that his disciples didn't wash their hands before they ate? Jesus says to them, ye hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, this people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and they honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Let me put this into my own words. Basically, Jesus is saying they're hypocrites because they think they're trying to honor God with their actions, but their heart isn't there. They don't have a sincere heart. And because of that, they're worshiping him in vain. I don't care how good of a person you are, how many good actions you have. If your heart is not sincere, then you are not truly worshiping God. So there's some people, they try and get very, some people, it's obvious that their heart's not in it, but other people, they try and kind of fake it. You know, they might get up there. I'm not saying everyone who raises their hands isn't legit. They can be certainly you can be legit if you raise your hand. But some people, they try and fake it. They'll raise their hand, or maybe they'll clap, or maybe they'll shake their body. And if there's a reason Baptists don't dance, okay? If you're going to worship like that, you should probably do it at home. But I don't care how energetic you are, how beautiful your voice is. If your heart's not in it, then you're just saying words. If your heart's not in it, then you're just burning energy with all that dancing. Sincerity is what is necessary for proper worship. Not just sincerity, but humility. There's a story that Jesus told of two different people. One was a Pharisee, one was a publican. Publicans were tax collectors, so they're like the IRS, super hated. I don't know. If there's anyone from the IRS in here, I don't hate you. Some people might, but not me. That's right. They haven't caught me now. Okay. But Jesus told a story of these two who prayed in the same general vicinity, and the Pharisee starts his prayers off. He looks up to heaven and says, God, thank you for not making me like this sinner over here. And then he starts listing off action after action of all these good things that he did. But here's the thing. The Pharisee did not go home justified. It didn't matter how many good actions he listed off. Jesus said he was not the one who went home justified. It was the publican who came to God with a humble heart and basically bowed his head to God and was so ashamed he wouldn't even look up to God. He was the one who went home justified. So it's not just a sincere heart, but a humble heart before God. Is all sincere worship accepted? No. According to the story of Cain and Abel, both of them sacrificed to God. Both of them did a worship towards God, but God only accepted one of them. I don't know if Cain was like super sincere or if he wasn't sincere at all, but all I know is that they both did some form of worship towards God, and God only accepted one. My dad last week, he was talking about how he came to the youth room and heard me teaching. What I was teaching about was pluralism. Pluralism is the idea that all religions are legit. So they're all legit ways to get to heaven. In other words, God accepts all forms of worship. But that's not true. According to this story, God only accepted one form of worship. And I honestly believe you cannot be a Christian and a pluralist, because my Jesus did not die on that cross because he forgot your Buddha could save you. Jesus said before he was betrayed, if there's any other way, let this pass from me. But Jesus died on the cross, meaning there was no other way. So not all forms of worship is accepted before God. There's only one form of worship, and there's only one way to God, which was through Jesus. And fortunately, because of the resurrection, he still lives today. So that's certainly a praise. Then, of course, the children of Israel, they tried to worship God through an idol. God did not like that. A lot of people died. Honor through obedience. Now, I told you guys, it's not just about love and worship is not just about actions. It's about sincerity. However, it's not just about sincerity, it's about actions. Well, did James say faith and works come together? That's not to say that works save you, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Sore throat. At least I'm sticking with that story. Now, Samuel comes to Saul. God talks to Saul or through Samuel and says, hey, I want you to destroy all these animals, because he went to war and the animals that the opponents had, he said, get rid of all of them. Well, Samuel comes to Saul and he's like, bro, why do I hear sheepies? Okay? And he's like, you know what Saul says to Samuel? I did it for the Lord. I did it so I can make sacrifices to the Lord. That seems like a nice thing. But Samuel says it to him in 1 Samuel 15, 22 through 23. And Samuel said, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. Let me paraphrase basically. Samuel's saying, you think you're honoring God with a sacrifice? How can you be honoring God when you're disobeying him? God would rather you obey him than do sacrifices. So sometimes we come before God. Let me give you an example. Say my dad said, Daniel, can you take out the trash? I go, Dad, dude, I want you to know I respect you. And I love you. Here's $5. And I walk away and I don't take out the trash. Is that honoring towards my dad? I may have said nice things to him. I may have even given him money. I may have even been sincere. But because I did not obey my dad, I did not honor him. Instead, I dishonored him. So worship requires more than just sincerity and even just saying the right things. It requires action. Oh, and that last verse, gosh, boy, did my dad use that verse against me. Yeah, Samuel knows what I'm talking about. My dad would go, Daniel, can you take out the trash? I'm like, oh, hold on, I'm in the middle of something. You know, son, the Bible says rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. Well, I get my little hiney up and say, well, I better get over there before I turn into a witch. So that verse was often used in my household. Now, honoring parents is very similar to honoring God. Of course, as I said earlier, actions, works are not what got us into heaven. It's very similar to the story of just our first birth, okay? Nothing I did, no action I took made my conception or made me, I didn't birth myself. It was all because of what my parents did that I'm in this world. It's all what my parents did that I was able to become their child. All right, again, nothing I did. I think everyone can agree on that. In much the same way, God, nothing I did made me a child of God. It was all because of what he did. Of course, I accepted that, and that's what's made me a child of God. But there was no action that I took. So there's no actions. Actions do not dictate whether I'm a child of my parents or whether I'm a child of God. But they do dictate whether I honor them. So again, actions are necessary for worship, but not necessarily necessary for salvation. Now, if you are saved and you are a child of God, you will be showing good actions because you'll want to serve God. I don't serve my dad because it's legally binding that I have to do everything my dad says, but because I love him, I want to do good things for him. I want to honor him. All right, we can serve him by serving others. This is another form of worship. Jesus, when he was talking to those following him, he told them, when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And the people said, when did we do these things? When were you naked and we clothed you? When were you hungry and we fed you? When were you in prison and we visited you? He said, when you do these things to others, you do them to me. So serving him, we can serve him by serving others. Of course, there's praise. Praise is obviously another form of worship. If you want to find verses for praise, look up Psalms. In fact, the whole Bible is praiseworthy towards God. Psalms 86:12. I will praise thee, O Lord, my God, with all my heart. Again, it requires a sincere heart. And I will glorify thy name forevermore. So who is to be worshipped? Exactly. God alone, not us. We're not coming to this worship service to hear nice songs. Yeah, you know, when I was preparing this message, I actually messaged Miss Melissa and I said, because some worship leaders, they want to hear what the topic is over and they might choose songs based off the topic. And I text her, I'm like, my topic's over worship, which is kind of easy for a worship leader to choose songs for, because that's kind of their job. But I said, if you want to build your songs around that, you can. First off, I told her like 2 days ago, so it was probably short notice. But she said, no, that's all right. I chose last week. I always choose a week ahead and only choose what I feel like the Holy Spirit is leading me to choose. And we are very fortunate to have a worship leader like that. Because some people are interested in what we want. Some people are like, this church likes modern music, that's what we're going to choose. Some people are like, this church likes hymns, that's what we're going to choose. But Miss Melissa was like, we want to choose what's honoring to God. So we were very fortunate to have her. If she chose a rap song, that might be a little difficult. Rap songs aren't very audience-oriented. Most of us cannot rap. So I appreciate her sticking with things we can do. But truth is, the worship service is for God and God alone. And we need to understand that. Why is he to be worshipped? He is the creator of life. He is the sustainer of life. And he is the reason for eternal life. He's all about that life. All these things are reasons to love God and worship him. How is he to be worshipped? With a sincere heart. I don't care how good of a person you are. I don't care if you clap your hands or how well you sing. If your heart is not in it, then you're just wasting your voice. With obedience. It's not just about a sincere heart. It requires obedience. Again, not for salvation, because nothing I did earned me my way into heaven. Thank God, because we'd all be going to hell if that was the case. It was all because of what Jesus did on the cross. But how I honor him is determined by my actions. With humility. We are nothing compared to God. We cannot come before God and be like, hey bro, I want you to know we're on equal levels. No, God and us are not on equal levels. We're nothing compared to him, which only brings us closer to the idea that God is so merciful for the fact that he wants us. And that is another reason we should be praising him. And of course with service. God says we should be loving. A lot of people, especially the Pharisees, they had the idea that they can just do action after action after action, as long as they kept the law. But they forgot the main part of the law, to love one another, to serve one another, and of course to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. I can't say it in Hebrew. I tried one time and it didn't sound right. Mr. Mike over there probably could, but I cannot. I can say the first part, but not the whole thing. Loving God is the first and greatest commandment. To love others is also the second commandment. And that is what God requires us to do. As we serve him, we are to serve others. When was the last time we worshiped God? Some of you guys might be thinking, well, I worshiped God last week. After everything that I've said, can we truly say we worship God? Unfortunately, I can look back and think think about the last time I worshiped God, and it wasn't as recent as it should have been. Honestly, though, worshiping God should be a continual thing. We should constantly be in humility towards Him. We should constantly have a sincere heart towards Him. We should constantly be obeying Him. When was the last time we worshiped God? Oh. A lot of us, we're so busy worshiping ourselves. We don't mean to. We think we're just the coolest things. I mean, I sure am. We are so distracted by humility, yeah. We're so distracted by ourselves that we forget that it's for God. We were put on this earth to worship and glorify God. Until we understand that, we will never truly worship God. And I'm not saying that if you don't have a sincere heart and you come to church and you're just saying words that you should get out of church until you get a sincere heart. That's like telling a fat person you should get out of the gym until you lose weight. The church, like the gym, is the right environment for someone to do that. Don't stop coming to church, but as we go throughout the rest of our lives, let us continue to try and find that sincerity of heart. Try and continue to obey God. Because it's not honoring to God if we say the right things but don't do the right things. God wants our hearts, not just our actions. You could give $1 billion to God. God's not short on money. What if someone gave $1 billion and like, hey, I'm going to keep on sinning, but here's $1 billion to make up for it. God's not going to say, oh, thanks. I'm the creator of everything, but I was really short $1 billion this week, so I'm glad you gave that to me. Keep on sinning. God He's not someone we can pay off with works or with money. God is not a corruptible God. He is a just and loving God, and He has set standards, and we can't change those standards, and probably for the best. If we were God, we'd make a mess of it. God is to be worshipped. Let's go ahead and pray. Dear Lord, I want to thank you for this day. Thank you that we're able to come before you, Lord, in a place, an environment where we can learn how to worship you more properly. Lord, I pray that you would give us that sincere heart, Lord, so that we're not just saying words or we're not just doing actions, Lord, but we're actually worshiping you in the way that's proper and true. Lord, I pray that you would help us as we seek to obey you, Lord. I know we're going to fall sometimes, Lord, but that doesn't change the fact that we shouldn't try not to. Lord, forgive us, because I know we haven't been worshiping you like we should, Lord. I pray that as we go throughout the rest of our lives, we would continue to obey you, Lord, and do it with a sincere and humble heart, and that others, when they look at us, would say, their God lives. I can see that true worship in them. Lord, please forgive us. In Jesus' name.